Hey friend, tonight we're stepping into the dim, flickering candlelight of medieval Europe, a world where beauty was not just admired, but demanded. Noble women devoted themselves to the pursuit of perfection, cultivating pale skin, high foreheads, and delicate features that marked their social standing and virtue. Every ritual, mixing powders, applying fragrant oils, or consulting the secrets of apothecaries, was performed with care, but sometimes with risk, as some substances were toxic and others carried hidden dangers. In this journey, we'll uncover the extreme lengths medieval women went to achieve society's ideal of beauty. The pale maiden whose face seemed almost otherworldly, the careful blending of colors, the whispered secrets of alchemists and herbalists, and the intimate, candlelit chambers where these rituals took place. Each scene tells a story of hope, fear, and ambition, revealing a world where appearance dictated power, identity, and survival. By the end, you'll see that medieval beauty was far more than vanity. It was a daily practice of art, science, and ritual, a mirror into the lives, struggles, and dreams of women who lived centuries ago. In the dim, flickering candlelight of a medieval chamber, long before the age of photography or the tyranny of the high-definition screen, beauty was a language spoken in symbols, and the most powerful, most sought-after symbol of all was not a particular shape of the eyes or a fullness of the lips, but the color of one's skin. The ideal that haunted the poetry, the art, and the aspirations of the era was one of almost supernatural pallor. To be beautiful, for a noblewoman, was to be white, not merely fair-skinned, but luminously, flawlessly, and almost unnaturally pale, like fresh milk, new-fallen snow, or the petals of a lily. This obsession with whiteness was not an arbitrary aesthetic choice. It was a deeply ingrained social signifier, a visible and undeniable marker of class. In a world where the vast majority of the population toiled under the sun, their skin weathered, browned, and reddened by the elements, a pale complexion was the ultimate status symbol. It was a declaration written upon the body itself that you did not work. It meant you lived a life of leisure, shielded from the harsh realities of the outdoors, a life spent within the cool stone walls of a castle or a manor house. It was the physical manifestation of nobility, a sign that your blood was pure and your position was secure. A tan was the brand of the peasantry, the mark of a life spent in the fields. A pale face was a crown. This ideal was reinforced everywhere in the culture of the time. The heroines of courtly romances and epic poems were invariably described in terms of their radiant whiteness. Isolde the Fair, with her skin as white as a May blossom, was the dream of every knight. Poets would exhaust their supply of pale metaphors to describe their beloved's complexion. She was as white as ivory, as alabaster, as a swan's feather. Religious art, too, played a powerful role. The Virgin Mary, the ultimate feminine ideal of purity and grace, was always depicted with a serene, translucent, and perfectly pale face. To emulate this look was not just a matter of aesthetic aspiration, it was a way of performing one's own piety and inner purity. A pale face suggested a virtuous soul, untroubled by the base passions that might bring a flush of color to the cheeks. To achieve this ideal, women were encouraged to go to great lengths to protect themselves from the sun. A noblewoman would never be seen outdoors without a hat, a veil, or a heavy hood to shield her face from the tanning rays. The parasol, a tool we now associate with a later era, had its early precursors in the form of small, portable shades. They would walk in shaded gardens and cloisters, their movements dictated by the position of the sun. The pursuit of pallor was a full-time occupation, a constant vigilance against the browning power of the natural world.
But for those who were not born with the requisite lily-white skin, or for those who wished to enhance what nature had given them, simple sun avoidance was not enough. This is where the world of medieval beauty secrets began, a world of strange concoctions and dangerous chemistry. The desire for a perfectly pale canvas upon which to build a beautiful face led women to a hidden pharmacopoeia of recipes, passed down in manuscripts or through oral tradition. They would create bleaches and whiteners from a startling array of ingredients, both benign and deadly. They would grind wheat into fine flour to dust upon their faces, or soak bread in milk to create a whitening paste. They sought out the roots of lilies and the sap of elder trees, believing that the whiteness of the plant could be magically transferred to their own skin. This cult of the pale maiden was the foundation upon which all other medieval beauty standards were built. The high forehead, the rosy cheeks, the golden hair. All of these were accents designed to enhance and draw attention to the primary canvas of a flawless, luminous, and impossibly white complexion. It was an ideal that was both deeply aspirational and deeply oppressive, a standard that demanded constant effort and, as we will see, often came at a terrible hidden price. The quest for skin as pure as snow was the beginning of a long and often perilous journey into the strange science of medieval beauty. White lead and vinegar, the poisonous quest for pallor. In the cool stone chamber, where the light from a high, narrow window does little to pierce the gloom, a noble lady prepares her face for the day. Her goal is the one that preoccupies all women of her station, to achieve the perfect, luminous pallor that signifies her rank and beauty. But the secrets to this perfection are not found in the gentle lotions or powders of a later age. They are contained in a small, heavy pot, and they are born of a dangerous alchemy of metal and acid. This is the world of Venetian ceruse, a cosmetic that promised the pinnacle of beauty and delivered a slow, insidious poison. The most powerful and effective skin whitener of the medieval and Renaissance periods was a substance made from white lead. This was not a subtle, translucent powder. It was a thick, opaque, and heavy cosmetic, created through a process of corrosion. Lead shavings would be steeped in vinegar, and the resulting chemical reaction would create a dense white crust of lead carbonate. This crust would be scraped off, dried, and ground into a fine, silky powder. To the medieval mind, it was a miracle of science, a substance that could transform a flawed, human complexion into a perfect, doll-like mask of pure white. The application was a ritual in itself. The lead powder would be mixed with a binder, often more vinegar and a little water, to create a thick paint-like paste. This concoction, known as ceruse, was then carefully applied to the face, the neck, and the décolletage. It was not a light dusting of powder. It was a substantial layer, a cosmetic spackle, designed to completely obscure the skin beneath. It filled in wrinkles, it covered blemishes, freckles, and the scars of diseases like smallpox, creating a smooth, flawless, and uniformly white surface. The effect, in the dim, flickering light of a medieval hall, must have been dramatic. It would have given the wearer an ethereal, almost inhuman glow, a living embodiment of the pale ideal celebrated in art and poetry. But this mask of perfection was a heavy one, and its cost was paid slowly, invisibly, over years of dedicated use. The women who used ceruse had no understanding of toxicology. They did not know that the lead in their beautiful white paste was a potent neurotoxin, and that with every application, they were slowly poisoning themselves. The lead was not merely sitting on the skin, it was being absorbed through the pores, entering the bloodstream and accumulating in the body.
The long-term effects were devastating. The first signs would often be on the skin itself. Chronic use of the lead-based cosmetic would damage the skin, causing it to become dry, wrinkled, and discolored. This created a tragic and vicious cycle. The more damage the ceruse caused, the more of it a woman needed to apply to cover up the blemishes it had created. The mask had to become thicker, the layer of poison more substantial. But the damage went far deeper than the skin. Lead poisoning, or plumbism, attacked the entire body. It caused severe abdominal pain, constipation, and a loss of appetite. It led to a characteristic blackening of the gums and the decay of the teeth. It attacked the nervous system, causing headaches, insomnia, and eventually tremors, paralysis, and a form of madness. It could lead to sterility or cause miscarriages. Many a noble lady, admired for her flawless white complexion, was likely a walking catalog of these terrible symptoms, her inner decay hidden, for a time, by the very substance that was causing it. The use of ceruse was a high-stakes gamble in the pursuit of beauty. It was expensive, and its use was largely confined to the very wealthy, the very women whose pale skin was meant to signify a life of health and leisure. In their quest for a complexion as pure as untouched snow, they engaged in a slow, intimate dance with death. The smooth, white face that stared back at them from a polished metal mirror was a beautiful, fashionable, and deadly lie, a perfect symbol of a time when the outward appearance of purity was worth any price, no matter how poisonous. The uncanny valley of the forehead, plucking, shaving, and the egg-like ideal. Beyond the quest for a perfectly pale complexion, the medieval ideal of female beauty took a turn that seems utterly bizarre to the modern eye. It was a beauty standard that celebrated not what was naturally present, but what was deliberately and painstakingly removed. The focus of this strange aesthetic was the forehead. In the art and literature of the late Middle Ages, the ideal woman was depicted with a high, wide, and perfectly smooth forehead, a feature that was seen as a sign of intelligence, serenity, and aristocratic grace. The goal was to create a face that resembled a smooth, perfect oval, an egg-like shape of serene purity. This was not a look that came naturally to most women. To achieve it required a dedicated and often painful regimen of hair removal. A noblewoman, seeking to emulate this fashionable ideal, would spend hours in front of her mirror, engaged in the meticulous process of raising her natural hairline. The primary tool for this was the tweezer. She would painstakingly pluck the hairs from the front of her scalp one by one to create the illusion of a higher, more expansive brow. This was a slow, agonizing process, but the pain was considered a small price to pay for the fashionable, high-domed look.
For some, plucking was not enough. They would resort to shaving the front of their hairline to achieve a cleaner, more dramatic effect. They might also use caustic depilatory creams, harsh concoctions often made with ingredients like arsenic or quicklime to burn away the unwanted hair. These creams were dangerous and unpredictable and could easily lead to chemical burns, scarring, and permanent hair loss. But the allure of the perfect, high forehead was so powerful that many were willing to take the risk. But the campaign of hair removal did not stop at the hairline. It extended downwards to the eyebrows and even the eyelashes. The medieval aesthetic had little room for the bold, expressive eyebrows that we might admire today. The ideal was a pair of thin, delicately arched, and often very faint eyebrows. To achieve this, women would pluck their eyebrows into fine, high arcs, and in some of the more extreme expressions of the fashion, they would remove them entirely. The complete absence of eyebrows was considered a look of high fashion in certain periods, creating a serene, almost blank and otherworldly expression. Even the eyelashes were not safe.
While long, thick eyelashes are a near universal sign of beauty today, some medieval trends favored a more minimalist look. It was not uncommon for women to pluck their eyelashes as well, further contributing to the smooth, hairless, and slightly unsettling ideal of the high medieval face. The goal was to remove any feature that might distract from the smooth, pale expanse of the skin and the perfect oval of the face. This look was a conscious and deliberate statement. It was an artificial beauty, a look that could only be achieved through time, effort, and a certain amount of suffering. Like the pale skin, it was a sign of a leisured class. A peasant woman, busy with her daily toil, would have neither the time nor the inclination to engage in such elaborate grooming. The high, plucked forehead was a symbol of a life dedicated to the cultivation of beauty, a life lived in the rarefied atmosphere of the court. To our modern eyes, the portraits of the era can be slightly unnerving. The women, with their vast, gleaming foreheads and their barely there eyebrows, can look alien, almost like figures from a science fiction film. They exist in a kind of aesthetic, uncanny valley, their features rearranged into a configuration of beauty that is difficult for us to recognize. But for the people of the time, this was the height of elegance. It was a beauty that was calm, intellectual, and pure. A face stripped of its earthly, animal hairiness and elevated to a state of serene, otherworldly perfection.
A whisper of color, the rouge of a rose petal. Narrative. While the foundation of medieval beauty was a stark, almost ghostly pallor, the ideal face was not entirely without color, but the use of color was a matter of extreme subtlety and careful moral negotiation. A face that was too rosy, too flushed, was seen as a sign of a common, rustic nature, or worse, of a passionate and therefore sinful disposition. The goal was not a bold, painted look, but a delicate, almost imperceptible hint of color, a whisper of a blush on the cheeks and a faint stain on the lips, suggesting a natural, youthful, and innocent vitality. The church played a powerful role in policing the use of cosmetics. Moralists and preachers frequently railed against the evils of face painting, viewing it as a form of deception, an attempt to alter God's creation, and a sign of vanity and lust. A woman who painted her face was seen as an apostle of the devil, using her artificial beauty to tempt men into sin. This created a profound sense of anxiety around the use of makeup. A noblewoman had to walk a fine line. She wanted to appear beautiful and youthful, but she did not want to appear overtly painted and thus risk accusations of immorality.
This led to a preference for colorants that could be passed off as natural. The ideal blush was one that mimicked the gentle, translucent flush of a young girl's cheek. To achieve this, women turned to the world of plants. One of the most common methods was to use the petals of red flowers, like roses or poppies. They would steep the petals in water or wine, or simply rub a fresh petal directly onto their cheeks to impart a delicate, sheer tint. Another popular ingredient was sandalwood, which could be ground into a fine, reddish powder. A more complex and more lasting form of rouge was made from a mixture of alcohol and Brazil wood or madder root, two plants that produce a powerful red dye. This concoction would create a liquid stain that, when applied carefully, could give the cheeks and lips a color that looked as if it was coming from within rather than sitting on the surface of the skin. The key was in the application. It had to be blended seamlessly, a mere suggestion of color, a healthy, innocent glow, rather than a painted-on blush. The lips, too, were to be colored with the utmost discretion. The ideal was not a bold, defined lip line, but a soft, rosy stain.
Women would use the same plant-based stains that they used on their cheeks. They might also bite their lips throughout the day to bring a rush of natural red blood to the surface, a simple and effective trick that could not be condemned as an artificial enhancement. The goal was to look as if you were naturally blessed with lips the color of a ripe cherry, a sign of youth and good health. The creation of these cosmetics was a part of the domestic arts of the noblewoman. Recipes were passed down from mother to daughter, and the lady of the manor, along with her still-room maids, would spend time preparing these fragrant, colorful concoctions from the herbs and flowers grown in the castle garden. It was a form of kitchen chemistry, a gentle domestic science. The medieval use of color was a subtle and secretive art. It was a game of illusion, an attempt to achieve a look of perfect, natural beauty through carefully concealed artificial means. The ideal was to look as if you were wearing no makeup at all, to possess a face that was as pale as a lily, but with the faint, God-given blush of a rose. It was a beauty that was both innocent and deeply deceptive, a testament to a world where the line between natural virtue and artificial enhancement was a constant and delicate negotiation.
The vanishing act, eyebrows, and the ideal of serenity. The modern aesthetic in many ways celebrates the expressive power of the face. We value eyebrows that frame the eyes, eyelashes that create depth and allure. The medieval ideal, particularly in the later centuries, was almost the complete opposite. The goal was not to frame and enhance the features, but to simplify and purify them, to create a canvas of serene, uninterrupted smoothness. This led to a beauty ritual that, to our eyes, seems like a kind of vanishing act, the systematic and often complete removal of the eyebrows and eyelashes. As we touched upon in the pursuit of the high forehead, the campaign against facial hair was a serious and central part of the medieval beauty regimen. The forehead was to be a high, wide, gleaming dome, and anything that interrupted its smooth expanse was a distraction. This included the eyebrows. The fashion, as depicted in the portraits of artists like Jan van Eyck and Rogier van der Weyden, was for eyebrows that were either plucked into impossibly thin, high, and faint arches, or removed entirely.
The process of achieving this look was painstaking. A lady would use her tweezers, or forcipulas, to meticulously remove each unwanted hair. To remove the entire eyebrow was a commitment, creating a look of striking and slightly alien purity. The face became a smooth, placid oval, the eyes unadorned and direct. This look was considered the height of aristocratic elegance. It conveyed a sense of intellectual detachment, of a spirit not troubled by the messy, expressive emotions that eyebrows can so easily betray. A furrowed brow, a raised eyebrow of surprise, these were expressions of a worldly, agitated mind. The browless face was a mask of perfect, untroubled serenity. For those who did not wish to go to such extremes, the goal was still one of minimization. Eyebrows were thinned and shaped into delicate semicircular arcs that sat high on the brow bone, far above the eye itself. This had the effect of making the forehead appear even larger and more prominent. There was no filling in of sparse brows with powders or pencils as we might do today. The goal was always reduction, never addition. The eyelashes, too, were often victims of this quest for a purified, hairless face. While some classical texts admired long lashes, the prevailing trend in the High Middle Ages seemed to view them as another unnecessary and distracting feature. Women would often pluck out their eyelashes one by one, a procedure that sounds almost unbearably painful. The Church Fathers had at times preached against long eyelashes, viewing them as a sign of vanity and a tool of seduction. St. Jerome, for example, warned that a woman's face should be free from any ornament and that even her eyelashes should not be provocatively long.
For a pious woman, plucking her eyelashes could be seen as an act of modesty, a way of renouncing the vanities of the flesh. This ideal of the hairless face created a very specific and, to us, very unusual standard of beauty. It was a beauty that was highly artificial, achieved through a process of erasure. It valued a kind of serene, blank canvas quality, a face that was a smooth, uninterrupted landscape of pale skin. It was the opposite of the natural girl-next-door look. It was a look that required dedication, a high tolerance for pain, and a complete rejection of the features that we now spend so much time and effort trying to enhance. To look at a 15th century portrait of a noblewoman is to see the culmination of this strange and exacting aesthetic. Her high, shaved hairline flows seamlessly into a vast, smooth forehead, which in turn descends to eyes that are unadorned by the dark frames of brows or lashes. It is a face that is startling in its simplicity and its serene, otherworldly calm. It is the end result of a beauty ritual that was not about adding, but about taking away. A vanishing act that sought to create the perfect face by erasing a part of what made it human.
A river of gold, the obsession with blonde hair. Just as the ideal skin was one of luminous pallor, the ideal hair in the medieval imagination was almost universally and dazzlingly blonde. From the heroic sagas of the Norsemen to the courtly romances of France and England, the heroes, and especially the heroines, were blessed with hair that shone like the sun. It was described in poetry as being like spun gold, like ripe wheat, like threads of silk, like the finest flax. Blonde hair was a symbol of youth, of purity, of angelic grace, and, in many cultures, of high birth and noble lineage. This preference for blonde hair had deep roots in European culture. In the Germanic and Scandinavian traditions, fair hair was a common and prized trait associated with the gods and heroes of their mythologies. The god Thor was red-bearded, but often fair-haired, and the goddess Sif was famous for her magnificent golden locks. As these cultures blended with those of the former Roman Empire, the association of blonde hair with a kind of noble northern vigor persisted.
In the world of medieval romance, a heroine was almost incomplete without her cascade of golden tresses. Queen Guinevere, Isolde the Fair, and countless other ladies of high renown were defined by their radiant, sun-colored hair. It was often described as being incredibly long, sometimes reaching to the floor, a sign of both her femininity and her high status, as only a woman of leisure could afford to grow and maintain such an extravagant feature. The image of the beautiful princess with hair of spun gold became a powerful and enduring archetype, a standard of beauty that would echo through Western culture for centuries. This ideal was also reinforced by religious imagery. Angels were almost always depicted with flowing golden hair, a visual shorthand for their celestial and divine nature. The Virgin Mary, too, was often portrayed as a fair-haired, blue-eyed woman, despite her historical origins. To have blonde hair was to have hair that was angelic, pure, and blessed. For the many women of medieval Europe who were not born with naturally fair hair, this powerful cultural preference created a deep desire to transform their own darker locks. This led to the development of a wide range of recipes and techniques for lightening the hair, a kind of medieval precursor to modern hair bleaching. The quest for golden hair was a serious and often time-consuming pursuit, another aspect of the endless work of cultivating the perfect aristocratic appearance. The methods they used were ingenious, drawing on the natural bleaching properties of the sun and various plant and chemical agents. A woman would create a lightening lotion from a variety of ingredients and apply it to her hair. Then she would sit in a sunny garden for hours,
her face shaded by a wide-brimmed hat with the crown cut out, allowing her treated hair to be exposed to the full bleaching power of the sun's rays. This hat, known as a solana, was a specific tool for this very purpose. The process was slow and required immense patience, another luxury that was only available to the leisured classes. The ingredients used in these bleaching lotions were a strange and varied collection. Some were relatively benign, derived from the natural world. Saffron, chamomile flowers, and gorse blossoms were all known for their ability to impart golden tones to the hair. Lemon juice, with its natural citric acid, was a popular and effective bleaching agent. Other recipes were more esoteric, calling for ingredients like broom flowers, calf's liver, or even the urine of a child, which contains ammonia, a powerful lightening agent. The obsession with blonde hair was a powerful force in the world of medieval beauty. It was a standard that was celebrated in art, literature, and religion, and it drove women to spend countless hours and to experiment with a host of strange and sometimes unpleasant concoctions in their efforts to transform their appearance. The image of a lady sitting patiently in her garden, her hair spread out in the sun, is a perfect encapsulation of the medieval beauty ideal, a pursuit that was artificial, laborious, and entirely dedicated to achieving a look that was synonymous with purity, youth, and the highest echelons of society. Dyer's Brew, Saffron, Lye, and the Alchemist's Hair. Narrative. The quest for the perfect shade of golden blonde hair was not a simple one. It was a form of domestic alchemy, a process of experimentation with a vast and often bizarre array of ingredients. Medieval women, armed with recipes from manuscript guides or with knowledge passed down through generations, became amateur chemists, mixing and brewing strange concoctions in their still rooms, all in the hope of transforming their hair from a common brown or black into the fashionable and angelic gold. The contents of a medieval dyer's pot would seem utterly unreal to us today. At the gentler end of the spectrum were the plant-based dyes. These were rinses and pastes made from flowers, herbs, and other natural materials that were known to impart a yellowish or golden hue. Saffron, the most expensive spice in the world, was a prized ingredient. A saffron rinse could give the hair a vibrant, if temporary, golden sheen. The cost of the spice meant that this was a luxury reserved for the very wealthy. A more common and affordable option was chamomile, which could be brewed into a strong tea and used as a final rinse to subtly lighten the hair over time. Other flowers like marigolds, broom, and gorse were also used for their yellowing properties. Roots and other plant parts were also popular. The root of the rhubarb plant could be boiled to create a dye that gave the hair a warm, honey-blonde tone. Onion skins, when boiled in water, produced a surprisingly effective golden yellow dye. These methods were relatively safe, and the results were often subtle and natural-looking, a gentle enhancement rather than a dramatic transformation. But for those with darker hair, or for those who desired a more dramatic and permanent change, these gentle plant rinses were not enough. This is where the recipes took a turn towards the more potent and the more dangerous. To truly strip the color from dark hair, a much stronger chemical agent was needed. The most common and effective of these was lye. Lye is a powerful alkaline substance, a caustic chemical that was typically derived from wood ash. In the medieval household, it was used for making soap and for heavy-duty cleaning. It was also the active ingredient in the most powerful hair lightening recipes. A woman would create a lye solution, often mixing it with other ingredients like honey or lead to form a thick paste. This corrosive mixture would then be applied to the hair. The lye was incredibly effective at stripping out the natural pigment, but it was also incredibly dangerous. A lye-based hair treatment was a high-risk procedure. If the mixture was too strong, or if it was left on for too long, it could severely damage the hair, leaving it brittle, straw-like, and prone to breaking. Even worse, it could cause severe chemical burns to the scalp, leading to open sores, infections, and permanent hair loss. The line between a beautiful blonde and a bald, scarred head was a perilously thin one. To use lye on one's hair was to engage in a dangerous game of chemical roulette. Other strange and unpleasant ingredients found their way into these hair-dyeing recipes. Alum, a mineral salt, was often used as a mordant to help the color take hold. Wine was a common liquid base, its acidity thought to help with the lightening process. Some of the more esoteric recipes, likely based more on sympathetic magic than on any real chemical principle, called for ingredients like lizards boiled in oil or the ashes of a burnt hedgehog. This strange collection of ingredients reveals a world that was both resourceful and deeply unscientific. It was a world of trial and error, where the desire for a specific look of beauty was so strong that women were willing to experiment with corrosive chemicals, expensive spices, and bizarre animal products. The medieval noblewoman, with her famously beautiful golden hair, was often not born that way. She was made through a complex, time-consuming, and often dangerous process of alchemical transformation.
A borrowed glory, wigs, extensions, and the art of false hair. Women in medieval Europe often strived for long, thick, flowing hair, but nature often had other ideas. Many women had hair that was thin or short or stubbornly dark. But the pressure to conform to the fashionable ideal was immense. And so, when nature failed to provide, the medieval woman turned to artifice. The use of wigs and extensions and other forms of false hair was a widespread, if often secretive, practice. It was a way to create the illusion of perfect, abundant hair, a borrowed glory that was a testament to both the wearer's fashion sense and her skill in the art of deception. The Church, as with most forms of cosmetic enhancement, took a dim view of this practice. Preachers and moralists frequently condemned the wearing of false hair as a sign of vanity, pride, and deceit. They argued that it was an attempt to unnaturally alter God's creation. Some went so far as to claim that a wig was a mortal sin, and that the false hair, often sourced from the heads of the dead, could not be blessed by a priest or receive holy water, thus damning the soul of the wearer. This strong moral condemnation meant that the use of wigs and hairpieces was often a clandestine affair, a beauty secret that was not to be openly admitted. Despite the dire warnings from the pulpit, the practice was common, especially among the upper classes. A woman who was losing her hair due to age or illness, or one who simply wished to have a more voluminous and fashionable hairstyle, would turn to the services of a wig maker or a skilled lady's maid. Wigs, known then as perukes, could be full head coverings or smaller pieces designed to be integrated with a woman's natural hair. These hairpieces were crafted from a variety of sources. The most desirable and most expensive was human hair. Hair merchants would travel the countryside, buying hair from poor peasant girls who were willing to shear their long locks for a bit of money. The hair of the dead was also a source, though one that was fraught with superstitious dread. For those who could not afford human hair, animal hair, particularly from horses or goats, could be used, though it was coarser and more difficult to style. The color of these hairpieces was, of course, a primary concern.
blonde hair was the most sought after and commanded the highest prices. Hair merchants would pay a premium for the long, fair tresses of a Scandinavian or German peasant girl. Darker hair could be dyed using the same lye-based concoctions that were used on natural hair, a difficult and often damaging process that could leave the hairpiece brittle and lifeless. Beyond full wigs, the use of extensions and pads was a common way to achieve the elaborate hairstyles of the era. Long braids of false hair, called tresses, could be woven into a woman's own hair to add length and thickness. Pads, made of hair or other materials, could be placed underneath the hair to create the fashionable, high-volume styles that often framed the face, such as the elaborate horned or heart-shaped headdresses of the 15th century. These structures were often so large and complex that they would have been impossible to create with natural hair alone. The false hair was the hidden scaffolding upon which these architectural hairstyles were built. The art of false hair was a game of careful illusion. The goal was to make the additions look as natural as possible, to seamlessly blend the real with the artificial. A skilled lady's maid was an expert in this art, able to weave, pin, and arrange the hairpieces in a way that was both beautiful and deceptive. But the secret was always at risk of being exposed. A sudden gust of wind, a poorly placed pin, or the prying eyes of a rival could reveal the truth, leading to social embarrassment and ridicule. The use of false hair in the Middle Ages is a fascinating testament to the timeless human desire to alter and enhance our appearance. It shows a world where women were caught between the powerful pressure of a demanding beauty ideal and the equally powerful condemnation of the church. It was a world of borrowed beauty, where the most admired of features, that long, thick river of golden hair, was often not a gift from God, but a carefully constructed and jealously guarded secret. The caged crown, braids, buns, and the modesty of the veil. Narrative. A noble woman's hair in the Middle Ages was a paradox. On the one hand, it was her crowning glory, a feature to be cultivated, lengthened, and lightened into a shining cascade of gold. On the other hand, for a married woman, it was a feature that was almost never to be seen in public. The display of loose, uncovered hair was a sign of youth, of virginity, and sometimes of loose morals. A respectable, married woman was expected to keep her hair tightly bound and covered by a veil, a wimple, or an elaborate headdress. Her glory was to be a caged and hidden thing, a symbol of her modesty and her submission to her husband. The styling of the hair beneath these coverings was an art form in itself. The most common and practical style was the braid. A woman's long hair would be parted in the center and woven into two thick braids. These braids were then often coiled and pinned over the ears, or looped and fastened at the back of the head. This created a neat, controlled foundation upon which to build the complex structure of the headdress. The goal was to contain the hair, to keep it from escaping its confines and betraying any hint of wildness or disorder. These braided styles could be incredibly elaborate. Ribbons of silk or gold thread could be woven into the braids to add a touch of color and richness. The braids themselves could be further coiled into intricate buns or knots, creating a sculptural effect. But all of this artistry was, for the most part, a private affair, visible only to her husband and her maids within the confines of her own chambers. Once the hair was styled, the crucial process of covering it began. The first layer was often a simple linen coif or cap that held the hair securely in place. Over this would be placed the veil. The veil was typically a long rectangle of fine, sheer fabric like linen or silk. It was draped over the head and could be arranged in a multitude of ways, pinned and folded to create different effects. It was a powerful symbol of a woman's married status and her piety. In the later Middle Ages, particularly the 14th and 15th centuries, these simple veils evolved into some of the most extraordinary and fantastical headwear in the history of fashion. These were not just coverings, they were elaborate architectural constructions of wire, fabric, and jewels. The hennin, for example, was the tall, conical, fairy tale princess hat from which a long, sheer veil would float. The horned headdress involved styling the hair, often with the help of pads and false hair, into two high horns on either side of the head, over which a veil would be draped. There was the heart-shaped headdress, the butterfly headdress, and a host of other fantastic shapes, all designed to completely conceal the natural hair while creating a dramatic and highly fashionable silhouette. These headdresses were powerful statements of wealth and status. The height of a woman's hennin, the richness of the fabric, the jewels that adorned it, all of these were signals of her husband's or father's position in the world. But they were also incredibly cumbersome. They were heavy, they restricted movement, and they made it difficult to pass through doorways. To wear one was to be in a constant state of careful, balanced motion. The one group of women for whom the rules were different was young, unmarried girls. A maiden was permitted to wear her hair long and loose, or in a simple, uncovered braid, as a sign of her virginity. On her wedding day, a bride would often wear her hair unbound, a final, public display of this symbol before it was to be covered for the rest of her married life. The treatment of hair in the medieval period is a perfect illustration of the conflicting pressures on women. Their hair was to be an object of supreme beauty, a testament to their femininity. But it was also seen as a powerful and dangerous tool of seduction, a feature that had to be controlled, contained, and hidden from the public gaze. It was a caged crown, a private glory whose beauty was reserved for a very select audience, a potent symbol of the strict moral and social codes that governed a woman's life.
A louse in the locks, the unpleasant reality of hair care. While the poetry and art of the Middle Ages painted a picture of noblewomen with immaculate, shimmering rivers of golden hair, the day-to-day reality of hair care was a far less glamorous affair. In a world without modern shampoos, conditioners, or regular access to hot water, keeping long hair clean and healthy was a constant and often losing battle. And the most persistent, unpleasant, and egalitarian of all hair problems was the ever-present louse. Head lice were a simple fact of life in the medieval period, an unwelcome but accepted companion for people of all social classes, from the humblest peasant to the highest queen. The close living quarters, the less frequent bathing, and the sharing of combs and bedding created a perfect environment for the parasites to thrive. While the wealthy had more resources to combat the problem, no one was truly immune. The primary tool in the war against lice was the comb. Combs were made from a variety of materials, including wood, bone, ivory, and horn. A fine-toothed comb was an essential personal grooming item, used not just for styling the hair, but for the daily ritual of combing out lice and their eggs, or nits. This was a tedious but necessary task, often performed by a lady's maid. The image of a lady sitting patiently while her maid meticulously combs through her long tresses is a common one in medieval art, and while it appears to be a scene of leisurely pampering, it was, in reality, a practical and necessary delousing session.
Beyond simple combing, medieval women used a variety of herbal concoctions to try to repel or kill the lice. Rosemary, lavender, and wormwood were all thought to have insect-repelling properties. A woman might create a hair rinse by boiling these herbs in water or wine, or she might have small, fragrant sachets of the dried herbs tucked into her headdress or her bedding. For a severe infestation, more drastic measures were required. Medical and household recipe books contained a variety of foul-smelling and often toxic recipes for delousing ointments. One common ingredient was stavacre, a plant that is a natural insecticide but also poisonous to humans. Another was mercury. These substances would be mixed with a base of fat or oil to create a thick pomade, which would be slathered on the scalp and hair and left on, sometimes for days, in the hope of killing the pests. Of course, these toxic ingredients could be absorbed through the skin, leading to a host of other health problems. Washing the hair was a major undertaking, performed much less frequently than we would today. When hair was washed, it was often with a harsh, lye-based soap that could strip the hair of its natural oils, leaving it dry and brittle. To counteract this, women would use a variety of conditioning treatments. An acidic rinse of vinegar or wine was used to restore the hair's natural pH balance and to add shine. They might also apply oils or fats, like olive oil or almond oil, to the hair to moisturize it.
The general cleanliness of the hair was also a concern. In a world of smoky castles and dusty roads, hair quickly became dirty and foul-smelling. To combat this, women used dry, powdered shampoos made from things like ground orris root or fine wheat flour. These powders would be worked through the hair to absorb excess oil and odors and then brushed out. This did not clean the hair in the modern sense, but it helped to keep it looking and smelling presentable between washes. The reality of medieval hair care was a world away from the romantic ideal. It was a constant struggle against dirt, grease, and above all, the persistent and maddening itch of lice. The beautiful, elaborate hairstyles we see in portraits were the result of hours of painstaking labor, not just in styling, but in the basic, unglamorous work of sanitation. The louse in the locks was the great equalizer, a humble but powerful reminder that beneath the veils, the jewels, and the borrowed golden tresses, the medieval body was still a product of its less than pristine time. A slender and supple form, the ideal of the body. While the face and hair were the primary focal points of medieval beauty, the ideal extended to the entire form. But the ideal body shape of the medieval era was quite different from the athletic or curvaceous ideals of other periods. The prevailing aesthetic, particularly in the later Middle Ages, celebrated a body that was slender, graceful, and almost ethereal. It was a look that emphasized youth, delicacy, and a kind of otherworldly fragility. The ideal woman, as depicted in the art of the 15th century, had a long, graceful neck, narrow, sloping shoulders, and a high, small waist. Her arms were long and slender, her hands delicate and pale. The overall silhouette was one of elongated, sinuous lines, a gentle S-curve that was both elegant and slightly unnatural. This was not a body that spoke of strength or robust health, but of refined, aristocratic delicacy. The torso was a key area of focus. The ideal was a small, high, and rounded belly. This may seem surprising to us as we are accustomed to a modern ideal of a flat stomach, but in the medieval period, a rounded abdomen was seen as a sign of femininity and, crucially, of fertility. The art of the era often shows women, even the Virgin Mary, with a gently swelling belly, a posture that was deliberately cultivated. Women would stand with their hips pushed forward and their back arched, a stance that emphasized this feature. The dresses of the period, which were often high-waisted and flowing, were designed to enhance this silhouette.
Above the rounded belly, the ideal chest was not one of voluptuous curves. Rather, the fashion was for small, high, and widely spaced breasts. They were often described in poetry as being like small, firm apples or pears. The low, plunging necklines that were fashionable in some periods were not designed to display a deep cleavage, but to showcase the pale, smooth expanse of the upper chest and the long, graceful column of the neck. To achieve this slender, high-waisted look, women's clothing was carefully engineered. While the tightly laced corset is more commonly associated with the Victorian era, the medieval period had its own forms of supportive and shaping undergarments. A garment called a coat or kirtle was often laced very tightly at the sides or back, cinching the waist and supporting the bust, helping to create the fashionable, streamlined silhouette. There was no culture of dieting or exercise as we would understand it today. A woman's body shape was largely a matter of genetics and diet. However, the diet of the upper classes, which was heavy in meat and wine, could lead to a less than slender figure. But since the body was almost always concealed beneath layers of flowing fabric, the actual shape was less important than the silhouette created by the clothing. The cut of the dress, the placement of the waistline, the way the fabric draped, these were the tools used to create the illusion of the ideal form.
For men, the ideal was also one of slenderness, particularly in the legs. From the 14th century onwards, men's tunics became shorter and shorter, and the focus of fashion shifted to the legs, which were encased in brightly colored hose or chausses. A well-shaped, muscular calf was a highly admired feature in a man, a sign of his strength and athletic prowess. The upper body was to be strong and broad-shouldered, but the overall look was one of lean, athletic grace, not heavy, bulky muscle. The medieval ideal of the body, for both men and women, was one that valued slenderness, elegance, and a kind of stylized, artificial grace. It was a beauty that was expressed not through the exposure of the body itself, but through the silhouette, the posture, and the elegant lines created by the clothing that concealed it. It was a beauty of suggestion and illusion, a fragile, elongated ideal that perfectly mirrored the delicate and otherworldly beauty of the faces that surmounted it. The fragrant steam, bathing, hygiene, and the myth of the unwashed. There is a persistent and pervasive myth about the Middle Ages that it was an era of profound and universal filth, a time when people never bathed and lived in a state of constant, unwashed squalor. While it is true that medieval standards of hygiene were vastly different from our own, the idea of the perpetually unwashed medieval person is largely a caricature, a misunderstanding of a complex and varied relationship with cleanliness. For the medieval person, particularly one of the upper classes, bathing was not an unknown practice. It was a ritual of health, of pleasure, and of social interaction. The Romans had left a legacy of public bathing culture in many parts of Europe, and while the grand public bathhouses, or thermae, fell into disuse, the practice of bathing did not disappear. In the medieval period, many towns and cities had public bathhouses, often known as stews. These were not just places to get clean, they were social hubs. They offered hot baths, steam rooms, and often the services of attendants who would scrub, massage, and even perform minor medical procedures like bloodletting. People would go to the stews to relax, to socialize with friends, and to conduct business. For a time, these bathhouses were a respectable and integral part of urban life. However, over the centuries, many of them developed a reputation for licentiousness and became associated with prostitution, which led the church to condemn them and their popularity to decline. But this did not mean that bathing itself ceased.
For the wealthy, in their castles and manor houses, private bathing was a luxurious and elaborate ritual. A bath was not a quick daily shower, it was a major production. Servants would have to haul and heat gallons of water over a fire, a laborious and time-consuming task. The bath itself was typically a large wooden tub, similar to a modern wine barrel, which would be placed in a private chamber, often near a fireplace for warmth. To prevent splinters, the tub would be lined with a linen cloth. The bathing experience was designed to be one of luxurious pleasure.
The bathwater would be scented with fragrant herbs and flowers such as chamomile, lavender, or rose petals. These were not just for the pleasant smell, they were also thought to have medicinal and skin-softening properties. The bather might be served food and wine while they soaked. It was a time of relaxation and indulgence, a welcome respite from the drafts and discomforts of medieval life. Personal hygiene also involved the use of soap. Medieval soap was typically made from a mixture of animal fat, like tallow, and wood ash, lye, and it could be scented with herbs. While it was a harsher product than our modern soaps, it was effective at cleaning the skin. People also used wash basins and pitchers for daily ablutions, washing their hands and faces upon waking and before meals. The washing of hands before eating was a particularly important ritual of politeness and hygiene in a time when many people ate with their fingers. Of course, the frequency of full-body bathing varied greatly. For the wealthy, a bath might be a weekly or even more frequent indulgence. For the peasantry, whose access to hot water and privacy was severely limited, a full bath was a much rarer event, perhaps reserved for special occasions. But even the poor would make efforts to wash in rivers or streams during the warmer months.
The medieval world was certainly not a sterile one. The lack of understanding of germ theory, the primitive sanitation systems, the close proximity to animals, all of these things meant that it was a world filled with dirt, disease, and unpleasant smells. But it was not a world that was ignorant of or indifferent to the concept of cleanliness. The fragrant steam of the medieval bath, whether in a bustling public stew or a private herb-scented tub, is a testament to a society that, within the limits of its knowledge and technology, valued and pursued the simple, civilized pleasure of being clean. A potion of milk and honey, skin softeners and lotions. The medieval ideal of beauty was not just about color, it was about texture. The skin, particularly on the face, hands, and arms, was expected to be not just pale, but also soft, smooth, and supple, like silk or satin. In a world without the benefits of modern dermatology or a scientific understanding of skin care, achieving this ideal required a great deal of folk wisdom and a reliance on the natural pharmacy of the kitchen, the garden, and the field. Medieval women were masters of creating lotions, creams, and potions from a surprising variety of natural ingredients, all designed to soften, smooth, and perfect the skin. The foundation of many of these skin-softening treatments was a base of milk or cream. The lactic acid in milk is a natural exfoliant, and the fats are excellent moisturizers. A noble woman might bathe her face in fresh milk or soak linen cloths in cream and apply them to her skin as a nourishing mask. Donkey's milk was considered particularly luxurious and effective, a belief that dated back to the Roman era and the famous beauty routines of Cleopatra. Recipes also called for buttermilk, which was thought to be particularly good for soothing sun-reddened skin. Honey was another cornerstone of the medieval beauty apothecary. With its natural antibacterial and humectant properties, it was a prized ingredient in skin treatments. It could be mixed with milk or almond oil to create a moisturizing mask, or blended with ground oatmeal to make a gentle exfoliating scrub. Its stickiness also made it a key ingredient in depilatory waxes for removing unwanted hair. A face mask of honey and flour was a common treatment, thought to tighten the skin and leave it feeling soft and smooth. Oils and fats were essential for moisturizing the skin, which could easily become chapped and dry in the drafty, cold castles of the era. Almond oil was highly valued for its light texture and pleasant smell. Olive oil, a staple of Mediterranean life, was also used.
Animal fats, such as lard or mutton tallow, were a more common and affordable base for ointments and salves. These fats would be rendered and clarified, then mixed with herbs and other ingredients to create a variety of skin creams. A cream made from lily roots infused in lard was thought to be particularly effective for whitening and softening the skin.
The garden provided a wealth of ingredients for skincare. Rose water, made by steeping rose petals in water, was a ubiquitous part of a lady's grooming routine. It was used as a facial toner, a gentle cleanser, and a fragrant splash to freshen the skin throughout the day. Cucumbers were sliced and placed on the face to soothe and cool the skin, a practice that has survived to this day. The juice of the cucumber was also used in lotions, believed to be effective at clearing up blemishes and reducing redness. For rough hands, a common problem even for women of the upper classes, more intensive treatments were needed. A woman might wear a pair of soft leather gloves to bed, her hands having first been slathered in a thick ointment of beeswax and almond oil. This medieval version of an overnight moisturizing treatment would leave her hands soft and protected. The creation of these potions was a part of the science of the still room, the domestic laboratory where the lady of the house and her maids would distill flower waters, infuse oils, and create a wide range of products for both medicinal and cosmetic use. The recipes, found in books like the famous Trotula medical texts, were a blend of practical herbalism, ancient folk wisdom, and a touch of magic. They reveal a world that had a deep and intimate knowledge of the natural properties of plants and other substances, a knowledge that was used to pursue a timeless goal: the achievement of soft, smooth, and beautiful skin.
A cloud of fragrance, perfumes, and the art of smelling sweet. To walk through a medieval city, or even a castle, would be to be assaulted by a symphony of powerful and often unpleasant odors. The lack of modern sanitation, the proximity of livestock, the smoke from countless wood and peat fires, and the less frequent washing of clothes and bodies all combined to create a pungent and pervasive miasma. In this world, to smell sweet was not just a pleasure, it was a necessity, a way to create a personal bubble of fragrance, a fragrant shield against the olfactory chaos of the surrounding world. The art of perfume was a vital part of the medieval sensory landscape, a tool for both personal pleasure and social distinction. The perfumes of the Middle Ages were not the complex alcohol-based sprays we know today. They were based on oils, fats, and resins, and their scents were derived directly from the natural world. The most common form of personal fragrance was a solid perfume, or a pomander. The name comes from the French pomme d'ambre, or apple of amber. A pomander was typically a small, ornate sphere, often made of silver or gold, with perforated holes. This sphere was filled with a hard, fragrant paste. The ingredients in this paste were a rich and exotic blend of spices, herbs, and animalic substances. A typical recipe might include ambergris, a waxy substance from the intestines of sperm whales, musk, a secretion from the musk deer, and civet from the civet cat. These animal-based ingredients were powerful fixatives, helping the scent to last longer, and they added a deep, complex, and earthy base note to the fragrance. These would be blended with ground spices like cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg, dried flowers like roses and lavender, and fragrant resins like frankincense and myrrh. All of these ingredients would be bound together with a wax or gum base to create a solid cake of perfume. A person of wealth would carry their pomander with them at all times, either suspended from a chain around their neck or attached to a belt at their waist. When they wished to refresh their scent, or when they encountered a particularly foul odor, they would simply lift the pomander to their nose and inhale, the rich, complex fragrance. The pomander was not just a perfume. It was also believed to have medicinal properties, with the aromatic fumes thought to ward off disease and protect the wearer from the bad air, or miasma, that was believed to cause plagues and other illnesses.
Liquid perfumes, though less common, also existed. These were typically oil-based infusions, created by steeping fragrant flowers or herbs in a carrier oil, like almond or olive oil. Rosewater and orange blossom water, created through the process of distillation, were also highly prized for their delicate, fresh scents. They could be used to perfume the skin, the hair, and even the bathwater. Scent was also used to perfume the home and clothing. Dried herbs and flowers, like lavender and rosemary, would be scattered among the rushes on the floor, releasing their fragrance when crushed underfoot. Linen and clothing would be stored in chests with sachets of these dried herbs to keep them smelling fresh. Incense, made from frankincense or other fragrant resins, would be burned in homes and, of course, in churches, filling the air with a thick, aromatic smoke that was intended to both purify the space and lift the soul towards God. In the medieval world, scent was a powerful indicator of status. The exotic spices and animal essences used in the finest pomanders were incredibly expensive, imported from distant lands along the spice routes. To smell of musk and ambergris was to smell of wealth, to announce to the world that you could afford to surround yourself with a cloud of luxurious imported fragrance. To smell sweet was to rise above the common stenches of everyday life, to create a personal atmosphere of refinement, purity, and power. The hidden foundation, undergarments, and the shaping of the form. Beneath the magnificent velvets, the rich brocades, and the flowing silks of medieval fashion lay a hidden world of simple, functional, and surprisingly important garments. The undergarments of the medieval era were the unseen foundation upon which the grand edifice of the outer clothing was built. They provided comfort, absorbed sweat, protected the expensive outer layers from the body, and, in some cases, played a crucial role in shaping the body into the fashionable silhouette of the time. This was the intimate, private layer of the medieval wardrobe, a world of plain linen and subtle engineering. For both men and women, the most basic and universal undergarment was the chemise or smock. This was a simple T-shaped tunic, typically made of linen, though the wealthy might have a finer version made of silk. Linen was the ideal fabric for a garment worn next to the skin. It was absorbent, relatively soft, and most importantly, it could be washed frequently and boiled for cleanliness, unlike the heavy dyed wools and silks of the outer garments. The chemise was the primary barrier between the body and the clothes, absorbing the sweat and grime of daily life and protecting the valuable outer layers from being soiled. For most people, this would be the only garment that was washed with any regularity. For men, the standard lower body undergarment was a pair of loose linen drawers or breeches known as brays. These could be long, reaching to the ankle, or shorter, ending at the knee. They were held up by a belt or a drawstring at the waist. Over these, a man would wear his hose, which were essentially two separate leggings, one for each leg, that were tied to the belt of the brays. This layered system provided both modesty and a degree of warmth. For women, the undergarments beneath the chemise are a matter of some historical debate. It is likely that most women did not wear any form of underpants or drawers for much of the period. Their lower bodies were simply covered by the long chemise and the many layers of their skirts. The concept of underwear as we know it today was largely non-existent. However, there is significant evidence for the use of shaping and supportive garments.
While the extreme whalebone and steel corset was a later invention, the medieval period had its own methods of sculpting the torso. A garment known as the coat or kirtle, which was often worn over the chemise but under the main gown, could be made of sturdy fabric and laced very tightly at the sides or the back. This lacing could cinch the waist, flatten the abdomen, and provide support for the bust, helping to create the slender, high-waisted silhouette that was so fashionable. Some sources also describe women binding their breasts with a simple strip of linen, a kind of proto-bra, either to support them or, in the case of the small-breasted ideal, to flatten them. Another important, though not strictly undergarment, was the stocking. Both men and women wore stockings, which were typically made of wool, or, for the rich, silk. They were held up by garters, simple strips of fabric or leather tied below the knee for men or above the knee for women, hidden beneath their long skirts. This hidden world of undergarments was a practical and necessary part of medieval life. It was a world of plain, unadorned linen, a stark contrast to the colorful and decorative world of the outer clothing. But these simple garments were essential. They were the buffer between the idealized public self and the real, physical body. They provided a layer of hygiene, a degree of comfort, and the subtle, hidden engineering that was necessary to create the perfect, fashionable form. They were the quiet, unseen foundation of the entire medieval wardrobe.
Abrasive smiles, the perilous art of teeth whitening. In the medieval hierarchy of beauty, after the pale skin and the golden hair, a fine set of teeth was a highly prized attribute. But this did not necessarily mean the perfectly straight, even teeth that we value today. The primary goal was whiteness. A smile that revealed clean, white teeth was a sign of health, youth, and refinement. A smile that revealed yellowed, stained, or blackened teeth was a sign of decay, old age, and a lack of personal care. And so medieval men and women employed a variety of methods to clean and whiten their teeth, ranging from the sensible and herbal to the dangerously abrasive. The basic tools for dental hygiene were simple. People would use a small stick, often from a twig of a tree like the hazel or the licorice root, frayed at one end to create a primitive brush. They would also use a clean, rough linen cloth to rub their teeth and gums, polishing away any food particles or surface stains. This simple, mechanical cleaning was the foundation of their dental care.
To aid in this process, a variety of tooth powders, or dentifrices, were used. These were abrasive powders designed to be rubbed on the teeth to scrub them clean. Some of the ingredients were relatively harmless. Powdered sage, mixed with salt, was a common recipe. The sage was thought to have whitening properties, and the salt acted as a gentle abrasive. Other recipes called for powdered herbs like rosemary or mint, which would also help to freshen the breath. However, many of these tooth powders contained ingredients that were far more abrasive and, ultimately, far more damaging to the teeth. Powdered bone, crushed eggshells, and ground-up pumice stone were all used for their powerful scrubbing abilities. While these substances would have been very effective at removing surface stains, they would also have been incredibly destructive to the tooth enamel. The constant use of such harsh abrasives would have stripped away the protective outer layer of the teeth, leaving them vulnerable to decay, sensitivity, and further staining. It was a classic case of a short-term cosmetic gain leading to long-term dental disaster.
Beyond powders, medieval people also used liquid rinses and pastes. Wine was a common ingredient in these recipes. It was believed that the acidity of the wine could help to whiten the teeth. People would swish wine in their mouths or use a cloth dipped in wine to rub their teeth. A particularly potent and particularly damaging recipe called for mixing wine with nitric acid, or aqua fortis, a highly corrosive substance, to create a powerful bleaching solution that would have eaten away at the enamel with terrifying efficiency.
To combat bad breath, which was a common problem given the state of dental health and the nature of the diet, people would chew on a variety of aromatic herbs and spices. Parsley, cloves, and cardamom seeds were all used as natural breath fresheners. They would also use fragrant mouthwashes made by steeping herbs like mint or rosemary in wine or water. The medieval approach to teeth whitening was a mixture of sensible herbalism and dangerous folk chemistry. People understood the importance of a clean, white smile, but they lacked the scientific knowledge to achieve it safely. Their desire for bright, white teeth led them to use substances that would have, over time, destroyed the very things they were trying to beautify. The abrasive smile of the medieval courtier was often a perilous one, a testament to a world where the line between a beauty treatment and a destructive act was often very fine indeed.
Erasing the flaws, the war on freckles, blemishes, and scars. Narrative. The medieval ideal of beauty was, above all, an ideal of flawless uniformity. The perfect face was a smooth, uninterrupted canvas of pale, luminous skin. Any mark, any blemish, any deviation from this perfect smoothness was considered a flaw, a stain on the canvas that needed to be erased. Freckles, moles, birthmarks, and the scars left by disease or injury were all seen as imperfections, and medieval women possessed a vast arsenal of strange and sometimes alarming remedies designed to wage war on these unwanted marks. Freckles, which we might now see as a charming sign of a sunny disposition, were viewed with particular hostility. They were a clear and unwelcome sign that one had been exposed to the sun, the very thing a noble woman was supposed to avoid. They were the enemy of the pale ideal, and there were countless recipes dedicated to their removal. Many of these remedies were based on the bleaching properties of acidic liquids. The juice of lemons or sorrel was a common ingredient applied to the skin to lighten the freckles. The sap of the fig tree, the crushed seeds of the radish, or the water from a smith's forge in which he cools his iron were all believed to have freckle-fading properties.
A more potent and more esoteric remedy was to use the blood of a bull or a hare applied to the face and allowed to dry. The logic behind this was likely based on a form of sympathetic magic, the belief that the vitality of the animal's blood could somehow cleanse and purify the skin. Whether it had any real effect is doubtful, but it speaks to the desperation to achieve a perfectly uniform complexion. Acne and other skin blemishes were another common complaint. To treat them, women would use a variety of poultices and creams. A paste of barley flour and honey was a common soothing and antibacterial treatment. Ointments made with lily roots, rosewater, and camphor were also used to calm inflamed skin. But for more stubborn blemishes, more dangerous ingredients were often employed. Mercury, in the form of sublimate of mercury, was a powerful and popular skin treatment. It was known to be effective at drying up pimples and lightening the skin, but it was also a deadly poison that could be absorbed through the skin, leading to the same terrible symptoms as lead poisoning. Scars, particularly the pitted scars left by smallpox, were a major cosmetic concern. To try to smooth these scars, women would use a variety of ointments designed to soften the skin and encourage new growth. A cream made from bear fat was thought to be particularly effective. They might also use abrasive scrubs, made from ground almonds or rice, to try to physically wear down the raised edges of the scar tissue. The medieval war on blemishes was a relentless one. It reveals a deep-seated cultural anxiety about imperfection. In a world that was so focused on the outward performance of purity and nobility, any flaw in the skin could be interpreted as a sign of an inner, moral flaw. A pockmarked face was a reminder of the ever-present threat of disease. A freckled face was a sign of a rustic outdoor life.
To erase these marks was to attempt to erase any evidence of the messy, imperfect realities of the world. It was an attempt to create a face that was not just beautiful, but also a perfect, unblemished symbol of an idealized aristocratic life. These strange and often dangerous remedies they used are a testament to how high the stakes were in this endless pursuit of perfection.
The poisoned chalice, mercury, arsenic, and the dark side of cosmetics. We have seen how the quest for a pale complexion led medieval women to paint their faces with white lead, a slow and insidious poison. But lead was not the only toxic substance to be found in the medieval beauty chest. The pursuit of flawlessness, of bright eyes and smooth skin, led to the use of a host of other dangerous chemicals and heavy metals, turning the art of cosmetology into a perilous and often deadly game. The beautiful face of a medieval noblewoman was frequently a mask, concealing a body that was being systematically poisoned by the very substances used to perfect it. Mercury was perhaps the most versatile and widely used of these cosmetic poisons. In its form of sublimate of mercury, it was a key ingredient in many skin treatments. It was a powerful antibacterial and was used to treat a variety of skin conditions, from acne to syphilis sores. It was also a very effective skin lightener. Lotions and creams containing mercury were used to bleach the skin, fade freckles, and remove blemishes. The effect was often quick and dramatic, which made it incredibly popular despite its known dangers. But mercury is a potent neurotoxin. Like lead, it is absorbed through the skin and accumulates in the body, causing a horrifying range of symptoms. Chronic mercury poisoning led to neurological damage, causing tremors, known as the mercurial tremors, memory loss, and personality changes, including anxiety and severe depression. It caused kidney damage, severe digestive problems, and a loosening and loss of the teeth. Many a lady praised for her blemish-free skin may have been suffering from the secret, debilitating effects of the very cream that gave her that praised complexion. Arsenic, another deadly poison, also found its way into the beauty regimen. Small amounts of arsenic were sometimes ingested in the belief that it would improve the complexion, giving the skin a soft, luminous, and fashionably pale appearance. It was also a key ingredient in many depilatory creams, used to burn away unwanted hair on the forehead and eyebrows. These creams were a mixture of arsenic sulfide and quicklime, a highly caustic substance. They were effective, but incredibly dangerous. A slight miscalculation in the recipe, or the application time, could result in severe chemical burns, permanent scarring, and, of course, the absorption of the arsenic into the system. Even the eyes were not safe from these toxic treatments. To achieve the fashionable look of large, bright, and dilated pupils, a look that was considered alluring and mysterious, women would use eye drops made from the plant belladonna, also known as deadly nightshade. The name belladonna itself means beautiful woman in Italian, a direct reference to this cosmetic use. The atropine in the belladonna plant is a powerful muscle relaxant, and when applied to the eyes, it causes the pupils to dilate dramatically. The effect was certainly striking, creating a wide-eyed, doe-like gaze, but it came at a significant cost. The dilated pupils could no longer react to light, making the user's vision blurry and highly sensitive to sunlight. Prolonged use could lead to permanent eye damage and even blindness. And, of course, the belladonna plant is highly toxic. If too much of the liquid was absorbed through the tear ducts, it could cause poisoning, leading to a rapid heartbeat, hallucinations, and, in high enough doses, death. The medieval beauty chest was, in many ways, a poisoned chalice. It contained the promise of perfection,
the tools to achieve the demanding and artificial ideals of the time, but it was also filled with death. The pursuit of beauty was a dance with danger, a daily gamble with some of the most toxic substances known at the time. It is a stark and sobering reminder that the desire to be beautiful can be a force so powerful that it can lead people to knowingly or unknowingly risk their health and even their lives.
The world of medieval beauty was not just a matter of personal taste and fashion. It was a moral and theological battleground, and the most powerful voice in this battle was that of the Church. For centuries, theologians, preachers, and moralists waged a relentless war of words against the art of cosmetology. They saw the painted face not as an expression of beauty, but as a sign of humanity's fallen nature, a symbol of pride, deceit, and dangerous worldly vanity. To alter one's appearance was to criticize God's creation, and to enhance one's beauty was to create a temptation, leading men into the snares of lust. The writings of the early church fathers laid the foundation for this condemnation. Tertullian, a 2nd century writer, was particularly vehement in his attacks on cosmetics. He argued that a woman who paints her face with rouge and whitener is committing a sin against God. Whatever is born is the work of God. Whatever is plastered is the work of the devil. He claimed that when such a woman was baptized, her painted face was already claimed by Satan, and she could not be truly pure. This powerful and terrifying imagery of the painted face as the devil's property would echo through the sermons of the Middle Ages.
The condemnation focused on two main sins: pride and deception. Pride, the deadliest of the 7 deadly sins, was seen as the primary motivation for using cosmetics. A woman who decorated her face was seen as being puffed up with vanity, more concerned with her earthly appearance than with the state of her immortal soul. She was trying to attract the admiration of men rather than seeking the approval of God. This focus on the self, on the fleeting beauty of the flesh, was seen as a dangerous distraction from the true purpose of life, to prepare for the hereafter. Deception was the other major charge. Cosmetics were seen as a lie, a false front designed to trick the observer. A woman who whitened her skin, rouged her cheeks, and dyed her hair was creating an illusion, a false promise of youth and beauty that she did not truly possess. This was not just a social lie, it was a spiritual one. Moralists argued that such a woman was like a false coin, beautiful on the outside, but base metal within. She was a trap for the eyes of men, a beautiful facade that concealed a corrupt and deceitful soul.
Preachers would use vivid and often misogynistic language to make their case. They would call a made-up woman an apostle of the devil, a decorated sepulchre, or a painted idol. They would tell cautionary tales of beautiful, vain women who were dragged down to hell by demons who claimed their painted faces as their own. These sermons, delivered from the pulpit to a captive and often illiterate audience, were a powerful form of social control. And yet, despite this constant and powerful condemnation, the use of cosmetics flourished. The very existence of so many sermons against makeup is proof of its widespread use. Noble women, and even some women of the lower classes, continued to pluck paint and powder in pursuit of the fashionable ideal. This created a profound sense of cognitive dissonance. A woman might listen to a fiery sermon against the evils of vanity on Sunday, and then on Monday she would return to her chamber to mix her lead-based whitener and her rose petal rouge.
This tension reflects the deep contradictions of the medieval world. It was a society that was deeply religious, but also intensely hierarchical and status conscious. The church demanded humility and a rejection of worldly things, but the secular world demanded a flawless performance of aristocratic beauty. The medieval woman was caught in the middle, navigating a treacherous path between the demands of her faith and the demands of her society. Her beauty regimen a secret and sinful ritual, a daily act of defiance against the stern, judgmental gaze of the church.
Despite the dire warnings from the pulpit, the practice was common, especially among the upper classes. A woman who was losing her hair due to age or illness, or one who simply wished to have a more voluminous and fashionable hairstyle, would turn to the services of a wig maker or a skilled lady's maid. Wigs, known then as perukes, could be full head coverings or smaller pieces designed to be integrated with a woman's natural hair. These hairpieces were crafted from a variety of sources. The most desirable and most expensive was human hair. Hair merchants would travel the countryside, buying hair from poor peasant girls who were willing to shear their long locks for a bit of money. The hair of the dead was also a source, though one that was fraught with superstitious dread. For those who could not afford human hair, animal hair, particularly from horses or goats, could be used, though it was coarser and more difficult to style. The color of these hairpieces was, of course, a primary concern. Blonde hair was the most sought after and commanded the highest prices. Hair merchants would pay a premium for the long, fair tresses of a Scandinavian or German peasant girl. Darker hair could be dyed using the same lye-based concoctions that were used on natural hair, a difficult and often damaging process that could leave the hairpiece brittle and lifeless.
Roses were perhaps the most prized of all the garden's inhabitants. The petals of the damask rose were the source of one of the most important and versatile beauty products of the era: rosewater. The process of creating rosewater was a form of simple distillation. Petals were steeped in water, and the fragrant steam was collected and condensed. The resulting liquid was a gentle, fragrant toner that was used to cleanse the face, soothe irritated skin, and add a delicate perfume to the body and to linens. It was the all-purpose beauty tonic of the medieval world. Lilies, with their pure white petals, were another essential beauty ingredient. The roots of the lily were believed to have powerful skin whitening and softening properties. They would be crushed and infused in milk or lard to create creams and ointments that were a safer, if less dramatic, alternative to the poisonous lead-based whiteners. The lily was a perfect example of the doctrine of signatures, a medieval belief that a plant's appearance indicated its use. The white lily, it was thought, must surely be able to impart its whiteness to the skin.
The caged crown, braids, buns, and the modesty of the veil. Narrative. A noble woman's hair in the Middle Ages was a paradox. On the one hand, it was her crowning glory, a feature to be cultivated, lengthened, and lightened into a shining cascade of gold. On the other hand, for a married woman, it was a feature that was almost never to be seen in public. The display of loose, uncovered hair was a sign of youth, of virginity, and sometimes of loose morals. A respectable, married woman was expected to keep her hair tightly bound and covered by a veil, a wimple, or an elaborate headdress. Her glory was to be a caged and hidden thing, a symbol of her modesty and her submission to her husband. The styling of the hair beneath these coverings was an art form in itself. The most common and practical style was the braid. A woman's long hair would be parted in the center and woven into two thick braids. These braids were then often coiled and pinned over the ears, or looped and fastened at the back of the head. This created a neat,
controlled foundation upon which to build the complex structure of the headdress. The goal was to contain the hair, to keep it from escaping its confines and betraying any hint of wildness or disorder. These braided styles could be incredibly elaborate. Ribbons of silk or gold thread could be woven into the braids to add a touch of color and richness. The braids themselves could be further coiled into intricate buns or knots, creating a sculptural effect. But all of this artistry was, for the most part, a private affair, visible only to her husband and her maids within the confines of her own chambers.
Inside the house, the still room was a place of quiet, focused work. It was a room equipped with a small stove or hearth, with mortars and pestles for grinding herbs, with alembics for distillation, and with shelves lined with earthenware pots and glass vials. Here, the lady of the house would oversee the creation of her household's remedies and cosmetics. She was not just a consumer of beauty products, she was a producer, a skilled artisan with a deep knowledge of her craft. This knowledge was often passed down from mother to daughter, a precious and practical inheritance. The still room was the source of the skin-softening lotions of milk and honey, the fragrant bath infusions, the hair rinses of chamomile and nettle, and the soothing salves for chapped hands and lips. It was a world away from the dangerous alchemy of the professional apothecary who might sell sublimate of mercury or Venetian ceruse. The beauty that came from the still room and the garden was gentler, safer, and more holistic. It was the beauty that was intimately connected to the cycles of the seasons, to the planting and harvesting of the herbs, and to a deep and abiding respect for the power that resided in the natural world. It was the quiet, fragrant, and life-affirming heart of the medieval beauty regimen.
The Trotula's Secrets, the Rise of the Beauty Manual. How did the medieval woman know which herbs to use for a hair rinse, how to mix a face cream, or what recipe to follow for a tooth whitening powder? While much of this knowledge was passed down through oral tradition, from mother to daughter and from mistress to maid, the Middle Ages also saw the rise of a new and powerful source of information, the written manual. In an age before printing, these precious hand-copied manuscripts were the repositories of medical and cosmetic knowledge. And among the most famous and influential of these was a collection of texts known as the Trotula. The Trotula is not a single book, but a compendium of 3 separate Latin works on women's medicine, believed to have been compiled in the southern Italian port city of Salerno in the 12th century. Salerno was a major center of medical learning at the time, a unique crossroads where Greek, Latin, Arabic, and Jewish medical traditions met and mingled. The Trotula emerged from this vibrant intellectual environment, and it became one of the most widely read and influential medical texts of the entire medieval period. While 2 of the texts focus on more general aspects of women's health, such as gynecology and childbirth, it is the 3rd text, titled On Women's Cosmetics, that provides a fascinating and detailed window into the world of medieval beauty secrets. This text is essentially a practical how-to guide for the medieval woman, offering a wealth of recipes and instructions for beautifying every part of the body, from the hair on her head to the skin on her feet. The author of On Women's Cosmetics, though traditionally identified as a female physician named Trotta of Salerno, was more likely a man, writing for a female audience. The text addresses the reader directly, with a sympathetic and practical tone. The author acknowledges the importance of beauty for a woman, stating that it is a sign of health and a gift from God. The recipes are presented as ways to preserve or restore this natural beauty, often framed in medical terms as treatments to correct a physical imbalance. The Trotula contains recipes for almost every cosmetic concern we have discussed.
There are detailed instructions for making skin whitening lotions using ingredients like lily root and wheat starch. It offers multiple recipes for dyeing the hair blonde using lye, alum, and a variety of plant-based colorants. There are instructions for making depilatory creams to remove unwanted hair, recipes for lip salves and rouges made from alkanet root and beeswax, and formulas for tooth whitening powders.
Beyond simple combing, medieval women used a variety of herbal concoctions to try to repel or kill the lice. Rosemary, lavender, and wormwood were all thought to have insect-repelling properties. A woman might create a hair rinse by boiling these herbs in water or wine, or she might have small, fragrant sachets of the dried herbs tucked into her headdress or her bedding. For a severe infestation, more drastic measures were required. Medical and household recipe books contained a variety of foul-smelling and often toxic recipes for delousing ointments. One common ingredient was stave-acre, a plant that is a natural insecticide but also poisonous to humans. Another was mercury. These substances would be mixed with a base of fat or oil to create a thick pomade, which would be slathered on the scalp and hair and left on, sometimes for days, in the hope of killing the pests. Of course, these toxic ingredients could be absorbed through the skin, leading to a host of other health problems. Washing the hair was a major undertaking, performed much less frequently than we would today. When hair was washed, it was often with a harsh, lye-based soap that could strip the hair of its natural oils, leaving it dry and brittle. To counteract this, women would use a variety of conditioning treatments. An acidic rinse of vinegar or wine was used to restore the hair's natural pH balance and to add shine. They might also apply oils or fats, like olive oil or almond oil, to the hair to moisturize it.
A tale of two faces, beauty for the rich and the poor. The relentless pursuit of the medieval beauty ideal, with its pale skin, golden hair, and flawless complexion, was a time-consuming, labor-intensive, and, above all, expensive endeavor. The world of beauty, like every other aspect of medieval life, was sharply divided along the lines of class. The face of a noblewoman and the face of a peasant woman told two very different stories, written in the language of sunlight, labor, and access to resources. There was not one medieval beauty, but two: the idealized, artificial beauty of the rich, and the practical, earth-bound reality of the poor. For the aristocratic lady, the quest for beauty was a central part of her life's work. Her leisure was the foundation of her beauty. Her pale skin was a direct result of a life lived indoors, shielded from the sun. Her long, immaculate hair could only be grown and maintained because she had servants to comb, wash, and style it. Her soft, uncalloused hands were a testament to a life free from manual labor. Her beauty was a performance of her status, and she had a vast arsenal of tools to aid in this performance.
A slender and supple form, the ideal of the body. While the face and hair were the primary focal points of medieval beauty, the ideal extended to the entire form. But the ideal body shape of the medieval era was quite different from the athletic or curvaceous ideals of other periods. The prevailing aesthetic, particularly in the later Middle Ages, celebrated a body that was slender, graceful, and almost ethereal. It was a look that emphasized youth, delicacy, and a kind of otherworldly fragility. The ideal woman, as depicted in the art of the 15th century, had a long, graceful neck, narrow, sloping shoulders, and a high, small waist. Her arms were long and slender, her hands delicate and pale. The overall silhouette was one of elongated, sinuous lines, a gentle S-curve that was both elegant and slightly unnatural. This was not a body that spoke of strength or robust health, but of refined, aristocratic delicacy. The torso was a key area of focus.
The ideal was a small, high, and rounded belly. This may seem surprising to us as we are accustomed to a modern ideal of a flat stomach. But in the medieval period, a rounded abdomen was seen as a sign of femininity and, crucially, of fertility. The art of the era often shows women, even the Virgin Mary, with a gently swelling belly, a posture that was deliberately cultivated. Women would stand with their hips pushed forward and their back arched, a stance that emphasized this feature. The dresses of the period, which were often high-waisted and flowing, were designed to enhance this silhouette.
This is not to say that the peasant woman was indifferent to her appearance. She too had her own world of beauty secrets, but they were born of practicality and a reliance on what was freely available. She could not afford lead or saffron, but she could create a simple skin-softening paste from oatmeal and buttermilk. She could not buy imported perfumes, but she could tuck a sprig of lavender from a common bush into her clothing. She could use the juice of a berry to stain her lips and cheeks, or the soot from a fire to darken her brows. Her beauty was resourceful, rooted in the folk wisdom of the village and the bounty of the common land. There were moments when these two worlds of beauty intersected. A poor peasant girl with naturally fair skin and long golden hair might find her beauty to be a valuable commodity. It could catch the eye of the local lord, leading to a precarious rise in her station. Or she might sell her beautiful hair to a merchant, a small fortune that would then be used to construct a wig for a wealthy lady who lacked what the peasant girl had been given by nature. The Tale of Two Faces is the story of medieval inequality. One face was a carefully protected and artificially enhanced symbol of leisure and wealth. The other was an honest, unvarnished reflection of a life of hard, physical labor. The gulf between them was as wide and as deep as the social structure that created them. The ideal of beauty, so celebrated in the art and poetry of the time, was a luxury item, a privilege that was for the vast majority of the population utterly and completely out of reach.
The elixir of youth, the medieval fight against aging. The medieval ideal of beauty was, in its essence, an ideal of youth. The pale, flawless skin, the hint of a rosy blush, the long golden hair, the slender, supple body, all of these were the attributes of a young maiden in the springtime of her life. In a society where a woman's value was so closely tied to her fertility and her ability to forge advantageous marriage alliances, the appearance of youth was a precious and fiercely guarded asset. And so, as a woman aged, as the first fine lines began to appear around her eyes and the first silver threads in her hair, she would turn to a special category of beauty remedies, the medieval equivalent of the anti-aging cream. The fight against wrinkles was a primary concern. The Trotula and other beauty manuals are filled with recipes for ointments and lotions designed to smooth the skin and erase the signs of aging. A common approach was to use ingredients that would plump and tighten the skin. A face mask made from egg whites was a popular treatment, creating a temporary tightening effect as it dried. Creams made with beeswax and honey were used to moisturize the skin and fill in fine lines. The fragrant steam, bathing, hygiene, and the myth of the unwashed. There is a persistent and pervasive myth about the Middle Ages that it was an era of profound and universal filth, a time when people never bathed and lived in a state of constant, unwashed squalor. While it is true that medieval standards of hygiene were vastly different from our own, the idea of the perpetually unwashed medieval person is largely a caricature, a misunderstanding of a complex and varied relationship with cleanliness. For the medieval person, particularly one of the upper classes, bathing was not an unknown practice. It was a ritual of health, of pleasure, and of social interaction. The Romans had left a legacy of public bathing culture in many parts of Europe, and while the grand public bathhouses, or thermae, fell into disuse, the practice of bathing did not disappear. In the medieval period, many towns and cities had public bathhouses, often known as stews. These were not just places to get clean, they were social hubs. They offered hot baths, steam rooms, and often the services of attendants who would scrub, massage, and even perform minor medical procedures like bloodletting. People would go to the stews to relax, to socialize with friends, and to conduct business. For a time, these bathhouses were a respectable and integral part of urban life. However, over the centuries, many of them developed a reputation for licentiousness and became associated with prostitution, which led the church to condemn them and their popularity to decline. But this did not mean that bathing itself ceased. The overall health and vitality of the body were also seen as crucial to maintaining a youthful appearance. Medical and beauty texts offered advice on diet and lifestyle. A woman was advised to eat moderately, to avoid excessive wine, and to get enough sleep. She was warned against strong emotions, as it was believed that anger and sadness could etch themselves onto the face in the form of wrinkles and a sour expression. A serene, placid temperament was thought to be the key to preserving a smooth, youthful face. The medieval fight against aging was a poignant and ultimately hopeless battle. In an era with a limited understanding of biology and a much shorter average lifespan, the signs of aging appeared early and progressed rapidly. The remedies they used, a mixture of practical herbalism and pure superstition, could offer only temporary and superficial relief. And yet, the existence of these anti-aging treatments reveals a deeply human and timeless anxiety. It is the fear of becoming invisible, of losing one's value and one's place in the world as youth fades. The medieval woman, mixing her swan fat ointment or carefully painting her graying hair with walnut juice, is a distant mirror of the modern individual browsing the anti-aging aisle of a pharmacy. The ingredients have changed, but the fundamental desire to hold back the clock, to preserve the fleeting beauty of youth for just a little while longer, remains exactly the same.
A dowry of the face. What beauty really meant. A dowry of the face. What beauty really meant. In the complex, hierarchical world of the medieval aristocracy, a woman's beauty was far more than a matter of personal vanity or aesthetic pleasure. It was a strategic asset, a form of currency, a crucial component of her family's power and ambition. A beautiful face could be as valuable as a dowry of land or gold. It was a powerful tool in the high-stakes game of dynastic politics, a key that could unlock the door to a powerful marriage, securing alliances, consolidating wealth, and ensuring the continuation of a noble lineage. For a young noblewoman, her marriage was rarely a matter of personal choice or romantic love. It was a business transaction, carefully negotiated by her parents, particularly her father. Her role was to be a pawn in this game, and her beauty was one of her most powerful attributes as a pawn. A reputation for great beauty could attract a host of powerful suitors, giving her family a wider range of options and increasing their bargaining power. A beautiful daughter was a way for a minor noble family to marry up, to forge an alliance with a more powerful and influential house. The medieval world was certainly not a sterile one.
The lack of understanding of germ theory, the primitive sanitation systems, the close proximity to animals. All of these things meant that it was a world filled with dirt, disease, and unpleasant smells. But it was not a world that was ignorant of or indifferent to the concept of cleanliness. The fragrant steam of the medieval bath, whether in a bustling public stew or a private herb-scented tub, is a testament to a society that, within the limits of its knowledge and technology, valued and pursued the simple, civilized pleasure of being clean.
This instrumental view of beauty also helps to explain the intense focus on purity and flawlessness. A beautiful face was a promise of a healthy and pure lineage. The pale skin signified a lack of peasant blood. The flawless complexion suggested a body free from disease. The rosy blush hinted at fertility. A suitor and his family were not just looking at a pretty face, they were scrutinizing a potential broodmare, assessing her fitness to produce healthy and hopefully beautiful heirs to carry on their name. Any imperfection, a scar, a blemish, a discolored tooth, could be seen as a sign of some underlying defect, a potential threat to the purity of the bloodline. Even for women of lower social standing, beauty could be a path to social mobility. A beautiful peasant girl might catch the eye of her lord, becoming his mistress and enjoying a life of relative comfort, albeit one without honor or security. A beautiful merchant's daughter might attract a noble suitor who is willing to overlook her lower birth in exchange for her father's wealth and her own pleasing appearance. Beauty was a wild card, a force that could, on rare occasions, disrupt the rigid social hierarchy. To understand medieval beauty, we must look beyond the strange recipes and the bizarre ideals. We must see it as it was seen then, as a serious and consequential matter. It was a dowry written on the face, a promise of status, health, and lineage. It was a woman's primary contribution to her family's strategic ambitions, and the source of her own limited but very real power in the world. The medieval quest for beauty was not just about looking good. It was about surviving and thriving in a deeply competitive and unforgiving world.